The anxious style is more of a fight, whereas the avoidant style is more of a flight, and so perhaps, that's the best way to categorize how these two tend to react with each other. Now the anxious attachment style tends to have fewer boundaries, or at least the boundaries that they do have they inconsistently enforce. If I enforce these boundaries, if I have demand what I know I need, not want, need, well then they might leave, and if they leave then I'll be alone, and the reality of the situation is that, people who have an anxious attachment style, have troubles being alone, at least for long periods of time, because they're lonely, and what it feeds itself into is that, oftentimes, the person with the anxious attachment style depends on others, particularly romantic partners for self-worth. This is what leads people who have anxious attachment style to hide themselves in romantic relationships, because there's not much going on in their own interpersonal lives, because they simply haven't identified what the problem is in the first place. Many people who have the anxious attachment style don't actually know that they have it, until they begin to learn about attachment theory, and learn about why it all happens. It can be very hard to distinguish, what's going on with me, why am I so much happier in relationships than out of relationships, completely ignoring the fact that, for at least the first 16 years of their life, you weren't even in a relationship, and for the longest time, you didn't crave one. It's because of the validation that is brought into their lives from romantic relationships, even if the relationship has a proclivity to be very toxic. So where does this come from? Why does the anxious attachment style exist? Mark Manson says, attachment styles as adults are influenced by how we relate to our parents, or caregivers as infants, as little helpless babies. This is our first and most important relationship of our lives, so naturally it's sort of the blueprint for how we all perceive relationships as we mature. We use this relationship blueprint as we age into late childhood and adolescence, when we typically start to form important relationships outside of our immediate relationship with our caregivers. Our peer groups take on a larger role as we continue to grow and learn. We learn and relate to others. These experiences further influence our attachment style, as eventually we become romantic with others, which in turn also influence our attachment style. So, A. You learn how to love from your parents. B. From your parents into the high school years, maybe around age 13, even younger, you begin to be raised by your peers. These collection of experiences create your attachment style, so while your early experiences with your parents do have the most considerable influence on your behavior, it's not the only factor. So where children who had their needs fully met by secure parents, develop a secure attachment. Children with anxious attachment maybe didn't get all of their needs met, maybe the needs that they did get met were a bit unpredictable, it wasn't always clear when it was going to happen. So generally they have a positive view of their peers, but a negative view of themselves. Their romantic relationships have often been overly idealized, sound familiar, and they rely too heavily on them for their own self-esteem. So to sum that all up, as an infant you didn't always have your needs fully met in a predictable way, and growing up, you had a series of experiences or events or bullying, things like that, which cause you several self-esteem issues, and the easiest, quickest way as an anxious avoidant to that, we learn to get our needs met as through romantic relationships. So we've talked about what it is, we talked about why it happens. How do you fix it? Well, this is for yourself. Step 1 is to acknowledge your pain, understand where it's coming from through self-reflection, through thinking about your past, through counseling and journaling. The more you can understand why this is happening and where it came from, the better grasp you can have on it going forward. Number 2 is question the validity of your fears when you're triggered. Do I really feel as bad as I feel, or am I compounding it? Is the situation as bad as we make it? Number 3 is to find a healthy way to express your needs directly, to avoid being triggered in the first place. Number 4 therapy. Therapy. If you don't like the therapist you find, go try a different one. Number 5 own when you are wrong, so you can recognize recognize what it looks like, moving forward and avoid it. Some accountability is called for here. Number 6, have your own life and control over things that bring you validation and acknowledgement. Number 7, if you are dating someone who has an anxious attachment style, be clear, open, honest, and tell them how you are feeling, tell them what you need, and at the same time, remind them of your love for them, provide them regular reassurance. There are many voices in the mental health community that believe that one of the strongest ways to bring somebody out of an anxious or an avoidant episode or attachment style is to date somebody who's secure, somebody who can be their rock. Now, it's not good to rely on just a romantic partner, but it can help, and so if the help is there, why not take it, as long as other things such as therapy are happening. Number 8, have multiple strong relationships outside of your romantic one. This can all be helped, it can all be fixed, and all it takes is a little elbow grease and a little willingness to be wrong from time to time, understanding where our trauma came from, what needs we have that didn't get met, and how we can meet them ourselves as strong, intelligent adults.